World Eaters, the chosen of Khorne. Bloodshed and butchery. Clad in crimson and brass they come, a tidal wave of boundless fury. They are without restraint, without mercy or fear. They are wrath incarnate, takers of skulls, reavers with an insatiable lust for blood. They are the World Eaters. A broken legion, they rampage across the galaxy, slaughtering and butchering victims beyond count in the name of Khorne, the Blood God. Driven by a compulsion to kill, they hurl themselves upon the enemy with berserk fury. Their eternal rage is undimmed by the passage of millennia. They are transhuman monstrosities, corrupted and mutated by their murder lust. They march to war in battle-scarred power armor, emblazoned with the unholy sigil of Khorne. The lenses of their horned helms glow with unbridled anger as they hack their way through their victims. Honor, glory, loyalty. The World Eaters have long forgotten such concepts. Driven to madness by the incessant pounding of the cranial pain engines known as the Butcher's Nails, they find relief only in the act of murder. Above the roar of chainswords, the thud of bolt guns, and the screams of the dying, the World Eater's battle cry thunders over myriad fields of battle. Blood for the Blood God. Skulls for the Skull Throne. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and faces of the Warhammer 40k setting. The grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace. There is only time for war. If you wish to see the channel flourish and possibly take on bigger topics and get better resources, then like and subscribe. But also consider joining our Patreon or throwing me a one-off tip in the form of a super thanks, if I have indeed earned your bounty. And today, we revisit the 12th Legion, the World Eaters. In their second codex ever, this is the information I feel I should relate. These codices are not cheap. I have not reiterated the unit entries, as they have not substantially altered from the first codex, dropped in 2023. So give that video, which is linked in the video description, a quick listen if you wish to know the lore of the 8-bound, etc., etc. So, let us get on with it. To quote: Blood rain fell from a scarlet sky to pool in shell craters and trenches. Pained cries rang out, mingling with the angry growl of chained weapons and the sound of shredding gristle. Reality tore open like a freshly cloven wound, and through the sundered veil flooded a torrent that washed across nearby combatants, coating them in viscera. From the gaping slit, Angron erupted into reality amidst a deluge of gore, his towering form slick with crimson ichor. He snorted steam and glared at the conflict unfolding around him. He sensed the iron tang of blood. He heard the battle cries of his gene sons rise to a deafening roar. Most of all, he sensed waves of fear rippling from the cowering human soldiers, shocked by his appearance. Throbbing pain coursed through his demonic form. He felt them still, the Butcher's Nails, gouging at the back of his skull, incessant, unrelenting. The Butcher's Nails were part of him, even in demonhood. He could not escape their endless call to battle. Only one thing would dull them: blood. In the taloned grip of his right hand, a spine gripper sang its throaty dirge. In his left, Samnii Arius hissed and bayed to taste mortal flesh. Angron stamped forward, his hooves crushing warriors into the mud-clogged mire. Through the pounding of the nails, he felt their bones snap and splinter like dried twigs. Before him, World Eater berserkers scaled a mountainous slope of the dead, trench systems wound around a series of squat fortresses, rising from a polluted wasteland pockmarked by shell craters and smouldering wreckage. The corpses of jackals and armoured humans lay scattered all around, piled high to forge trenches and reach battlements. As Angron's sons pressed forward, the remaining defenders hammered them with bolter fire. He saw them then, Sanguinius' sons, their crimson armour pristine and gleaming. Molten ire coursed through him. He leapt forwards, wing beats propelling him over the heads of berserkers. Flak fire splashed against his brass plate and seared holes in his flesh. He barely felt their impact. Consciousness fled, chased into the recesses of his mind by flood of aggression. Angron swept Spine-Grinder into a mass of combatants, its teeth shearing through ceramite plate, ragged meat spraying. The sons of Sanguinius and Angron alike were torn asunder, their remains spurting blood and leaking viscera. Still, the agonizing pounding in his mind continued. An explosive shell smashed into the demon Primarch's side. He snarled and spun towards the source of the incoming fire. A lumbering dreadnought, its weapon arms glowing, strode towards him, firing as it came. Angron roared in return, the sonic wave of his bellow knocking human soldiery from their feet. He broke into a charge, raising Samnii Arius aloft. The sword's runes glowed white-hot, trailing steam as it cut through the air and sliced into the dreadnought's ceramite chassis. Two halves of the vehicle, glowing orange where the molten blade had parted them, toppled to the ground. Boiling amniotic fluid sloshed from its sundered sarcophagus, spilling forth the withered remains of the Space Marine inside. Angron left the stricken dreadnought behind, wings driving him towards a predator, its cannon swiveling to face him. Spine-Grinder sheared through the weapon's barrel. The demon Primarch hurled himself shoulder first into the vehicle's armoured flank, flipping it onto its roof. Samnii Arius came down again, point first, and buried itself deep in the predator's hull. The glowing blade ignited fuel and ammunition. A crackling series of explosions rippled from within the tank, incinerating the helpless crew inside. Berserkers surged forwards in the demon Primarch's wake, their battle cries growing louder and more wild by the second. Chain weapons whined and cackled, becoming muffled as they were clogged with meat. The berserkers hurled themselves at their enemy, hacking, stabbing, killing. Angron aimed a kick at a Blood Angel's Terminator, connecting with enough force to propel the foe through the air. The Terminator slammed into a bunker wall some 24 feet distant. Ferrocrete splintered under the force of the impact. Berserkers rushed towards the downed foe, bellowing wildly as they rained axe blows upon him. The demon Primarch lost himself in violence and fury. The throbbing pain of the butcher's nails receded, blotted out by the intensity of his anger. Angron brought Spine-Grinder down in a thunderous arc, driving its spinning teeth through the skull of another victim. Blood Angel or World Eater, Angron cared not. Khorne's chosen Primarch leapt atop her Ferrocrete battlement, sweeping his club-like tail across its ramparts, and sending cowering soldiers spinning into the midst of frenzied World Eaters' infantry. "Blood for the Blood God!" Angron bellowed, the cry loud enough to crack armor glass and shatter eardrums. The foe had begun to break now, fleeing desperately from the battlefield. Angron glared contemptuously down upon the cowards, the nails pounding once more in his mind's recess. None would escape the Red Angel's wrath. Vile tribute. As fanatical adherents to the Blood God's creed, the World Eaters seek to demonstrate the depths of their faith through the hideous carnage they inflict. Khorne values two offerings above all others: blood and skulls. Some World Eaters deliver such trophies in volume, prioritizing slaughter on an apocalyptic scale. Others are more selective in their offerings, demonstrating their martial might and boundless faith by hewing the skulls from the mightiest opponents. Khorne's favored. The World Eaters are murderous killers driven by an insatiable bloodlust, their minds consumed by maddening fury and their bodies riven by mutation and demonic possession. They wage endless campaigns of gore-drenched violence, slaughtering all in their path. Bloodthirsty devotees of Khorne, the World Eaters are a traitor legion composed of monstrous warriors, forged from human stock through an intricate and agonizing combination of gene therapy and blood-soaked surgery. Each is a hulking transhuman brute, an instrument of butchery and destruction, possessing superior speed, strength and resilience, and utterly devoid of pity. Long before they followed their primarch, Angron, into treachery, the World Eaters already possessed a reputation for needless brutality. Since turning their backs upon the Imperium, they have fully embraced their base desires. They seek only to kill, hack, cleave, and butcher their way across the galaxy, taking a tally of skulls and blood, leaving burning ruins and mountains of corpses in their wake. The World Eaters have no time for diplomacy, intrigue, or subtlety. They simply seek to indulge their urge to slaughter. All World Eaters undergo a unique procedure that sees them implanted with psychosurgical devices known as the Butcher's Nails. Fixed deep within a warrior's brainstem, these torturous devices fill the subject with constant agony, amplifying their aggression to inhuman levels. The pain inflicted by the Butcher's Nails drives all World Eaters to the brink of insanity and beyond. Only the endorphins released by pure and unadulterated anger provide relief from the Butcher's pounding. Thus, the World Eaters hurl themselves into battle with berserk fury, desperately seeking the momentary bliss that bloody violence offers. Consciously or otherwise, all World Eaters serve Khorne, the blood god. It is said that Khorne cares not from whence the blood flows, only that it continues to do so, and the World Eaters spill oceans of it. Those World Eaters who truly devote themselves to his cause may turn to demonic patrons to enhance their killing might. Warp-induced mutations are rife amongst their ranks, many of which serve to render the subjects more lethal. These aberrations may include swollen masses of demonic muscle, lashing tentacles, chitinous-bladed arms, and crushing claws. The World Eaters display their devotion to the blood god in the burnished, blood-spattered plate and brass trim of their power armor. Affixed to helms and daubed upon the pitted armor of their transport, the mark of Khorne takes pride of place. Vehicles and power armor alike are replete with trophy drakes displaying skulls, hides, and other macabre remains of butchered victims. Blood, gore, and gristle cake ceramite armor, the indelible mark of centuries of merciless butchery. Many of those doomed to face the World Eaters recoil before the charnel stench and nightmarish aspect of their battle-hungry foes. Those foolish enough to attempt surrender fare no better, for they are cut down without mercy. Khorne despises none more than cowards. All World Eaters desire to vent their rage in melee combat, the vibration of growling chainswords felt through tensed muscles, the whine as adamantine teeth grind through ceramite, rip through wet flesh and splinter bones. These visceral experiences temporarily dull the agony of the Butcher's Nails in a way that no other form of combat can match. Whilst World Eaters may wield various ranged weapons, all are drawn towards the thick of the fighting, where they may lose themselves utterly in killing. The World Eaters never practice stealth and subtlety. Brute force and inhuman aggression are the tools to which they turn time and time again. Seething tides of goremonger and jackal cultists hurl themselves forwards, heedless of incoming fire, clambering over the bodies of their fallen to hack at the enemy. In their wake come the World Eaters themselves. Berserkers of Khorne, insensate with rage, sweep into the rents carved by the cultists, their chain weapons widening mere lacerations in the enemy line into gaping wounds from whence blood flows in torrents. Roaring battle tanks, their tracks encrusted with churning viscera, unleashed brutal salvos at point-blank range. Armored transports disgorged gore-encrusted ranks of warriors clad in ancient Terminator armor. Cannoned demon engines bound forth to spit molten death and butcher cowering infantry with blood-drenched talons. Enacted by lesser warriors, such tactics result only in defeat. When performed by hyper-aggressive space marines, they are brutally effective. The Era Indomitus allows the World Eaters to indulge their burning need for slaughter on an apocalyptic scale. From roving bands of reavers to cornate blood crusades composed of thousands of battle-crazed berserkers, the World Eaters' many warbands continue to carve ragged paths of butchery and slaughter across the galaxy. No bastion of humanity or Xenos enclave is beyond their reach, and no mortal being safe from their limitless wrath. In the entirety of the known galaxy, there are few warriors more feared than Angron's sons. The 12th Legion. The 12th Legion, which would become the World Eaters, were amongst those who embarked upon the Emperor's Great Crusade. Their subsequent descent into madness is steeped in treachery and bloodshed. With furious violence and incomparable bravery, the 12th Legion forged a reputation for securing total and absolute victory over any opponents. Whenever the Emperor's armies encountered a foe that refused to surrender, the 12th were tasked with their utter destruction. Over time, the Emperor himself came to refer to them as his warhounds. Such was their determination and raw savagery. The pits of Nuceria. When the Primarchs were scattered across the stars, Angron's pod was cast to Nuceria, a forbidding world ruled with an iron fist by sadistic techno-tyrants. The planet's oppressors sought to maintain order by forcing malcontents to take part in gladiatorial games. Seized by slavers, Angron was thrust into the arenas to serve as entertainment for the elite. He spent his formative years in the dank cells beneath Nuceria's arenas. There he learned to fight, combining these skills with his gene-wrought might to lethal effect. With each gory kill, Angron won greater favor until the arena crowd sang his name above all others. He developed close-knit comradeship with his fellow gladiators, respecting the honor and dignity of these prospective rivals. It was on Nuceria that Angron was implanted with the butcher's nails. The surgery served to erode Angron's sanity, turning a warrior already capable of savage violence into a raging killer, barely able to control his fury. Now afflicted by the ceaseless throbbing of the butcher's nails, Angron at last resolved to lead a revolt and overthrow Nuceria's elite High Riders. With Angron at their head, the gladiators broke free from the arena, slaughtering their guard and crushing army after army sent against them. Many of their number were slain, though those who fell did so without regret, for at least they died free. Despite the carnage they inflicted, Angron's band of warriors were utterly outmatched by the technological superior forces of the High Riders. The resistance came to an end in the peaks of a soaring mountain range. There they resolved to make their last stand and meet their doom as free people. For Angron, however, there would be no such release. As his beloved comrades prepared to do battle, the Primarch was teleported away from Nuceria's surface. The Emperor had come for his son, and had no intention of allowing him to die for such a futile cause. Angron would never forgive the Emperor for extracting him from Nuceria against his will. He had been denied the opportunity to die free for a cause of his choosing, whilst fighting alongside those he loved most. The feelings of guilt and hatred Angron experienced at that moment have curdled within his soul ever since. The Horus Heresy. Upon taking command of the 12th Legion, Angron renamed them the World Eaters. His warriors saw him as a shining example of aggression and violent potential. Thus, when he decreed that all would be implanted with the butcher's nails, the majority willingly submitted themselves to the surgery. Many died under the knife as the Legion's apothecaries perfected the implantation process. Their sacrifice was deemed worthwhile, for the butcher's nails would bring the entire legion closer to emulating their Primarch. The World Eaters' reputation for needless brutality only increased during Angron's reign. Indeed, the legion committed so many atrocities during the Great Crusade that their actions drew the Emperor's ire. The bitterness Angron felt towards his father only increased as he was censured for his barbarity. When the War Master Horus began his rebellion, Angron needed little persuasion to pledge his legion to the War Master's cause, and his forces took part in many bloody battles against their former allies. The legion's warriors were pressed during the climactic fighting of the terrible conflict, the bloody and destructive siege of Terra. There, Angron, by now transformed into a demonic monstrosity, engaged his brother Sanguinius in a titanic duel before the Eternity Gate, and was struck down. Whilst Angron's demonhood shielded him from death, he was cast into the warp and separated from his legion. Horus's defeat and demise would soon follow, bringing an end to the War Master's rebellion. In the wake of the defeat on Terra, the remnants of the World Eaters' Legion were forced back towards the Eye of Terror by the vengeful forces of the Imperium. Khan, Angron's most influential lieutenant, had been so severely wounded during the Siege of Terra that he lingered upon the brink of death. Devoid of leadership, lacking vital supplies, and driven to madness by the constant pounding of the butcher's nails, the surviving warriors were left vulnerable. Many were slain as they made their way across the ravaged Imperium, closely pursued by the vengeful Imperial loyalists, seeking to end them for good. The Shattering of Skarathrax. Seeking refuge on the demon worlds within the Eye of Terror, the World Eaters encountered a large fleet of void ships belonging to the Emperor's children over an unnamed world. As the two forces engaged in a standoff, Khan awoke and forced the stalemate into a ferocious and bloody conflict. He named the planet upon which the battle occurred Skarathrax, meaning place of judgment or destruction in Nagrakali, the language most commonly used by the World Eaters in that area. Skarathrax was a world of extremes. Its lethally cold nights forced even space marines to seek cover during dark hours. Yet despite these forced ceasefires, the campaign proved as deadly as those fought during the Horus Heresy. The Emperor's children were numerically superior and far more organized than their cousins, the World Eaters, yet the raw ferocity and animalistic determination of Angron's sons saw the war turn in their favor. Though they were able to gain ground, the stop-start nature of the conflict caused many of the World Eaters' insanity to worsen, as they endured long nights of inaction, through which the butcher's nails tore remorselessly at their psyches, with demands for battle that they could not heed. Eventually, in what would come to be referred to as the Night of Madness, Khan snapped under the pressure. Taking up a flamer, he ran through the World Eaters and burned them out of their sanctuary, forcing them into the gathering cold and onto the attack. Those who sought to stop him or refused to fight were hacked down in blind fury. His actions incited infighting that saw the World Eaters descend into a crazed rage and resulted in their remaining cohesion being shattered. Brother turned upon brother in an apoplectic rage. Many died at the hands of former allies or froze to death upon Skarathrax's frigid surface. By dawn, the 12th Legion had been reduced to small warbands, roving squads, and individual champions. Fighting continued between the few remaining detachments. Those who saw little point in fighting to the death on such a worthless world clashed with those who advocated remaining and continuing the battle. The Emperor's children, who had previously been upon the brink of defeat, exploited the World Eaters' infighting with great glee, killing many more of Angron's sons before fleeing the planet. In a single night of madness, Khan's actions had destroyed the World Eaters as a unified fighting force. Never again would they take to the battlefield in the numbers seen during the bitter and devastating battles of the Horus Heresy. War without end. Events on Skarathrax determined the course of the World Eaters for millennia. The remnants of the Legion, divided into autonomous warbands, set about pursuing battle wherever they could find it. Angron spent long swathes of the following centuries distant from his gene sons. The remaining World Eaters spent little time speculating about their demon Primarch's location. Deprived of the resources they possessed as a unified legion, the World Eaters' warbands were forced to reave and plunder what they required to make war. Within the Eye of Terror, they turned upon their former allies of the other traitor legions, vying with them for enslaved people, ammunition, warships, and other supplies that their endless warfare required. Constant fighting eroded their numbers as the millennia passed. Death in battle was not the only factor that contributed to the decline. Some warriors, disillusioned by their legion's collapse or tempted by the promise of further conflict, opted to throw in their lot with the Black Legion or to align themselves with other heretic factions. To replace these losses, many warbands began to seize strong youths from the worlds they raided, intended to forge them into World Eaters. However, the crazed berserker surgeons were amongst the only inheritors of the knowledge once held by the World Eaters' apothecaries. Whilst these macabre vivisectionists could harvest gene seed from fallen battle brothers or the corpses of loyalist space marine foes, they were few in number. The berserker surgeons' gore-encrusted laboratories were incapable of producing new warriors at the rate required to replace their ever-accumulating losses. Thankfully, Khorne has never been short of converts to his bloody creed. Kill-crazed warriors from rival traitor legions and fugitive renegades from otherwise loyalist space marine chapters had continued to fall into the embrace of the blood god. Many of their number look upon Angron's sons as the ultimate expression of Khorne's murder lust. A flood of such aspirants has continued to provide World Eaters warbands with fresh recruits for their cause. Such warriors endure the agonizing implantation of the butcher's nails so that they might be granted the inhuman rage they seek and, with it, take the skulls of enemies beyond count. Thus, despite their unending campaigns of brutal violence, the World Eaters' numbers remain strong, albeit at the cost of the genetic purity of Angron's legion. The slaughter on Armageddon. It would not be until Millennium 41 and the First War for Armageddon that the remnants of the treacherous 12th Legion would return to anything approaching unity. Even then, it was to be temporary. Rallied by a refocused Angron, the World Eaters descended upon this hive world aboard the space hulk Devourer of Stars. Whether by design or coincidence, the invasion coincided with a period of strife upon Armageddon's surface. Focused entirely upon suppressing revolt and rebellion, Armageddon's defenders were caught utterly by surprise. Billions were slain in the fighting that followed. The World Eaters and their cultist allies inflicted such butchery upon the populace that Khorne's demons were drawn on the tides of the warp and threw the veil into reality. Only thanks to the presence of an entire great company of space wolves led by Logan Grimnar and the arrival of the demon-hunting Grey Knights was the invasion eventually halted. Angron manifested in the company of a dozen bloodthirsters, towering greater demons of Khorne, and led an assault upon Armageddon's primary hives. His rage was terrifying to behold. Hundreds fell to his black blade, their souls dragged screaming into the warp. The climactic battle saw Angron and his bloodthirster retinue fight with a force of Grey Knight Terminators under Brother Captain Terramar Aurelian. The conflict turned with the shattering of the Black Blade, which his sons believed he had wielded for 10 millennia. Aurelian managed to banish Angron back to the warp, though doing so cost him his life. Indeed, of the 109 Grey Knights Terminators who took to the field, only 13 survived. The planet would take many years to recover from the carnage Angron's World Eaters had brought. Even in defeat, Angron had left an indelible bloodstain upon the surface of Armageddon. The tear through which he had first manifested, known as the Red Angel's Gate, lingered as an empiric weakness that barely held the warp at bay. A complement of Grey Knights remained on Armageddon, tasked with watching over the dormant scar on reality. Deprived once more of Angron's raw and magnetic anger, the Legion disintegrated again. New champions of Khorne hacked, bludgeoned, and slaughtered their way into positions of power. Angron, trapped once more within the warp, seized with anger at the ignominious defeat, salving his wounded pride in the blood and ichor of that realm's denizens. It would be some time before the Red Angel would return to the galaxy to wreak destruction. Warbands of the World Eaters. A Legion fractured. Of those World Eaters that remain, few possess any knowledge of the ancient history of their Legion. Fewer still care about such times. Their purpose now is to kill and to make war, and, in doing so, offer praise to Khorne. The fighting on Scalathrax may have spelt the end of the World Eaters as a unified Legion, but their tale of bloodshed and carnage was only beginning. From the Legion's ashes rose countless warbands, varying in size and ambition, but all led by puissant champions of Khorne, each of whom had earned their position by taking the skulls of their rivals. Warriors and cultist devotees are drawn to their charismatic and ruthless champions in their droves. To their followers, it is clear that these despots possess the favor of Khorne, but they are worthy commanders only because they offer their warriors continued opportunities to slaughter, burn, and destroy. Command of a warband is always temporary. Most World Eaters walk the path to glory, seeking the immortality of demonhood. Such rewards are granted only to the mightiest and most ambitious warriors. Thus, the Legion's leaders regularly find their positions under threat. The simplistic but effective hierarchy of officers of varying rank and seniority that Angron oversaw in the Legion's ancient past has long been abandoned. All leaders, from the champions who lead individual squads to the lords and demon princes who command entire warbands, rise to positions of power by winning victories, taking skulls, and, ultimately, slaying their superiors. In some warbands, such leadership challenges are resolved through ritual combat. Others have no concept of honor. Instead, outright betrayal and murder are the expected methods by which burgeoning champions of Khorne improve their station. Those who lead War Eaters' warbands are rarely given to ostentatious titles. Any they may opt to use are intended to demonstrate their ferocity, brutality, combat prowess, or devotion to Khorne. Karok the Pulverizer, whose power maul pulped the skull of warboss Scragsgab. Garok Coward's Bane, who has earned the favor of Khorne by butchering the devoted of Slanesh wherever he finds them. The Demon Prince, Rorgoth Heart Eater, whose cannibalistic tendencies are emulated by his followers. These are but 3 of the hundreds of World Eaters to have earned blood-drenched infamy for their unbound savagery. These warlords bestow upon their warbands names chosen to inspire fear in prospective victims and to honor Khorne. Such appellations include the Skull Flencers, the Eight Scarred, the Blood Gorged, and the Sons of Slaughter. The livery utilized by these myriad groups of World Eaters is nearly always dominated by red, which represents blood, brass in honor of Khorne, and black for death. Of course, regardless of allegiance, the power armor worn by the World Eaters is almost always covered in thick layers of fresh blood and caked with viscera. Markings and icons are many and varied, where they are still visible amidst accumulated grime and battle damage. Some warbands still retain the icon of the World Eaters Legion on their pauldrons, fanged jaws closed around a planet. Others have replaced this iconography with stylized versions of cornate runes, leering demonic faces, skulls, and other symbols of death, warfare, and destruction. Warbands dedicated to Khorne range significantly in size. The smallest may consist of only a few dozen berserkers, the largest 100 strong, and have void ships, armored vehicles, and lethal demon engines at their command. Multiple warbands will occasionally be drawn together, pooling their resources to assault a particularly well-defended target. But it takes a forceful personality to maintain such a union, and in fighting between rival factions, is typical. The Primarch's influence. Angron is the only being amongst the World Eaters capable of battering his fractured legion into any form of lasting unity. Yet the Demon Primarch's ever-raging campaigns of violence extend far beyond real space, and it is rare that his focus settles upon a single objective. However, when he curses the galaxy with his presence, many World Eaters are drawn to fight at his side. Amongst some of Angron's most infamous campaigns were the Dominion of Fire, the First War for Armageddon, and the Battle of Malak campaigns. In each of these conflicts, he strode to war at the head of a force containing scores of warbands. At the Battle of Idolatros, on the blighted surface of Wormwood, Angron led thousands of berserkers in battle against a combined force of Blood Angels and Dark Angels. Despite inflicting terrible wounds upon Commander Dante, Angron was banished by the returning Primarch of the Dark Angels, Lion L. Johnson. In the wake of this battle, those World Eaters that survived were once more scattered and fragmented. Warbands of Khorne. The Brazen Butchers. The Brazen Butchers consider themselves to be Khorne's most devoted followers. They battle in the time-honored tradition of the World Eaters Legion, with massed infantry charges and unbridled fury. Entering battle clad in armor of burnished brass, they carve a gory path through the foe. The gore thrown up by the bite of their chain axes soon coats their gleaming plated viscera. Before long, it is utterly obscured by dried blood. By killing with such indiscriminate rage, they seek to shatter the veil of reality with the intensity of their violence, summoning Khorne's infernal hordes from their hellish realm. The Brazen Butchers rejoice when the demons hear the call and pour from the Immaterium to wreak bloody slaughter. They redouble their murderous efforts and compete with demonic entities to harvest the skulls of their foes. When the battle has been drawn to its inevitable conclusion, and the blood god's fiendish servants have faded back into the Empyrean, the Brazen Butchers ritually cleanse their armor of accumulated gore and dried blood in preparation for the next battle. Then they are on the move again, seeking fresh targets upon which to vent their ire. The Skull Takers. Many of the blood god's faithful view the followers of his sibling Slanesh with scorn. They despise the Dark Prince's obsession with frivolity and excess. Only a handful of Blood Eaters remember the Legion Wars. Some of these bitter warriors bear a smouldering enmity for the Emperor's children in particular. The Skull Takers, commanded by Hans Koren, who counted several amongst their ranks and continued this legacy of loathing. Koren and his berserkers, delighting besting the obsessive and arrogant sons of Fulgrim. The Flickering Blades, a warband of the Emperor's children who, in their arrogance, claimed to be masters of the blade, would feel the wrath of the Skull Takers. The depraved thralls of the Dark Prince claimed that none could best them at swordplay. Koren begged to differ. Berserkers at his side, he descended upon the Flickering Blade's lair, deep within the Eye of Terror, intent on proving himself right. Days of furious fighting followed. The guttural roars of berserkers and their chain axes were accompanied by the singing of the Flickering Blade's shimmering swords. Fury carried the day, and, as the last Emperor's children fell headless to the ground, Koren dedicated his victory to Khorne. The Witch Cleavers. Led by Lord Goran Zal, a veteran of Scalathrax, the Witch Cleavers epitomize the blood god's hatred for psychers. Operating in the turbulent empiric storms and spatial anomalies of the segmentum obscurus, they pursue a campaign of persecution against any who possess the gifts granted by the Empyrean. The opening of the Gore Chasm was heralded by a considerable increase in psychers, which has provided the Witch Cleavers with more prey than ever before. They have ambushed the Imperium's psyker-carrying black ships, painted astropathic relays with the innards of their operators, and even taken the heads of Black Legion sorcerer lords. They smell witchcraft as if it were blood, tracing it to its point of origin with unerring accuracy. They have fought many battles with Craftworld Yggdrasil, clashing with the Eldari across the Eye of Terror's Crone worlds. Champions of the Witch Cleavers believe the skulls of potent psychers to be a grand prize, and their armour and vehicles are adorned with gory trophies ripped from the corpses of witches, seers, and psychic entities. Karzal's Desecrators. Many World Eaters have opted to join Abaddon the Despoiler's Black Crusades. Some share the War Master of Chaos's desire for vengeance upon the Emperor and his realm. Of these, a few even don the Black Legion's ebon plate, casting aside their allegiance to the World Eaters. Others possess no grand vision for galactic conquest, nor do they care to fight the long war. These battle-hungry killers are simply drawn like ravenous scavengers by the prospect of bloodshed. The Desecrators are one such warband. Under the command of the demon prince Karzal, they reave and slay a path of bloodshed across the worlds of the Nachmund Gauntlet. Possessing a large number of void ships, they favour swift planet strike attacks, utilizing massed dropships and drop pods to make planetfall before shepherding thousands of jackal and goremonger cultists towards the foe. As these expendable bodies drown the defenders in viscera, teleportariums flare aboard blood-red void ships, deploying large numbers of elite Terminators into the midst of the fight. With these heavily armoured champions at his side, Karzal wades into the fray, cleaving heads from shoulders and upholding his warband's reputation as mercilessly efficient and bloodthirsty shock troops. End quote. Next week will be lighter nibbles again, as I work towards some banquets of lore and, of course, the monthly installment of the Thaddeus. I hope to see you there. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. Like and subscribe, tip if you think I've earned your bounty, and do check out the video description for other entertainment opportunities and codes to make savings on games. But most importantly of all, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo. And there we go. That's a rap.